I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Nate.
And we're the Byrams.
Been together for over a decade.
We have 2 kids.
2 businesses.
Our strategy
for your best life
is to just go with it. Go for it.
Sorry. Your story.
Guess who's back again? So, we want to paint a picture for you guys. You just want me to just start telling the story?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a night at our beloved kitchen table that we have since gotten rid of. That was my one request in moving to our new house.
It was a nice table.
It was served us well until it became a visual reminder for me of this night where Nate sat me down and we had a really hard conversation where he told me that if I did not get my act together, essentially, get moving, get shaken, that I would be left alone without my kids. He would be with someone else and someone else would be raising them, and my kids would have no respect for me. And
are you sure I said that?
Yeah, pretty positive, because I've never felt a lower low ever in my life of just, like the rock bottom. I think there's a level below that, and I think that is where I was residing.
There's typically like a layer of sand and some other things below the rocks, but that's probably where you were.
Yeah, it was.
That was a rough night.
Yeah.
That was a really rough night. I think we had, a pretty blow-up conversation where, I was furious and angry and frustrated. And I think the biggest thing for me was I just couldn't bring myself to understand why we couldn't understand each other, why we couldn't connect. I remember, it was just, I don't know what happened, what prompted that, but I just remember thinking like, okay, I know where this could potentially lead. And I felt like it was in that moment I needed to say something like, hey, if we continue on this road together, there's only one way this ends.
And that was a blow of a conversation that, as hard as it was and as, hard as it still is to think about, it still hurts. Just the thought that I ever got to a point that you even had to say something like that, that it's still, that was,
hard
years ago. And it's still, it is still a dagger, and it's still one that is hard to talk about.
Yeah. Which is why we're leading with this,
and
right?
this is why I laugh when I'm uncomfortable.
Step number 1.
Yeah.
I remember I left. We got done with the conversation, and I was like, I just need some time to think. I just need,
which scared the ever-loving
which for me, I just needed to
crap out of
remove
me.
myself from the situation.
Yeah, which I get now.
I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. And at this point, this was about 5 to 6 years into our marriage.
5, yeah, I think.
Yeah. Going on 6, I think.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was, now knowing that after 5 years, that's when stuff starts to hit the fan. That's when things get real. That's when reality sets in. That's when
you're no longer playing house.
You are truly not playing house. The honeymoon phase is over and life's getting real. Mm-hmm. And so I just got in the car. I went up to the mountain, and I just remember thinking Lord, I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. I'm so lost. I'm so confused. And I think the biggest thing was I just couldn't connect. I just did not understand how to get through to you to share my needs or to
we were trying to communicate, but it was just static and white noise to the other.
And it was just talking, our mouths were moving, but it wasn't like we were understanding or listening to each other. And I think that is a very common place to be.
Yeah. I remember you left and I went into what ended up being our son's room at our old house and got a notebook and just wrote out a prayer and was like, Lord, I cannot move myself. For some reason, I feel so stuck in a weight of quicksand that I cannot move myself. I cannot act. I cannot, just simple tasks like were so hard for me that I was like, Lord, you have to move me because I cannot move myself. Like physically pick me up and like a marionette, move my arms like a puppet master because I don't know. I just don't know how to move. And that was really hard. It was a hard conversation I had with the Lord. It was a hard conversation I had with you. And it's, again, still, that one, it's a little, it hurts a little to think about that one for sure.
Trust me. I mean, even just thinking about what I said, I was like, good gosh, Nate, like, why would you ever say something like that? But it was hurt people,
Yeah.
and I was hurt and I was resentful. And I feel like it's a very common place that I'm sure other couples find themselves in is like, I'm hurting, I'm resentful, and you did something to me that hurt my feelings, but I don't know where we go from here because I can't really see past the hurt and the frustration. And so unfortunately, it comes across with very messy things and emotions. But I mean, really, we both talked. This is the first step, I think, in like a true recovery story. I think a true champion story. I think to get your marriage, your relationship on track, the first step is having a hard conversation.
And they will be messy and they will be hard. And it might take, for me, it took many a hard conversations. I feel like the way I can describe it now, like years removed from this and many hours in therapy later, like it was my own emotions being trauma had put all of this like muck on my eyes to where I could only see what I was doing. And each hard conversation like moved a little out of the way, cleared my eyes a little bit. But that conversation felt like it was the Lord took a rag and like wiped my eyes off. And it was like, all right, this is, if you want to see, this is what you can do to start having hard conversations that you listen to.
So, really, a hard conversation is someone having to be bold in the relationship to say, hey, I don't think this is right. I don't think what we're doing is good. I want more. I want better. I want us to be better. And unfortunately, that had to be me to be the bold person.
I don't do conflict. If you don't know me in real life, conflict makes me physically ill.
Nope.
So I am grateful that you cared enough when I did not know how, that you were bold enough and the Lord lit a fire in you to bring hard conversations to me that, they've hurt. We've had to do some healing together and like words that we have both said to one another, but if you didn't.
Well, and partly the hard conversation was selfish. Because I was like, okay, this is not what I deserve. I don't need, I don't deserve a partner that's not my teammate. I don't deserve a marriage like this. And so part of it was selfish, and I think a lot of the frustration came from that. But I think the other thing for me is like, I truly loved you so much that I knew, like, okay, I know, Lord, something's not right here. Something's not right. And even if it takes me until my dying last breath, like, I'm always going to fight for this. And, that was the place where I was in, but I'm sure most are in a place where, like, more of the selfishness of like, well, you did this to me 10 years ago, and I'm still hurt by that, and I'm going to bring that up now because Tiff said I need to bring this up, But I think the hard conversation turned into more hard conversations than it was. I just remember saying, like, if I didn't bring this stuff up to you and if I didn't have the hard conversations, then we truly should be fearful for our relationship.
Yes. I vividly remember you saying that.
If I stop bringing this up and we stop having hard conversations, then I would be more scared at that point than I feel like I was in that moment. And I didn't know that.
I vividly remember that.
But it was like, unless I want this to work.
Yeah.
I wanted this to work. And so I think that's why I was mean. I think that's why I was just like dead set on like, I know we're not living up to our potential, but I knew you weren't. And I know, I mean, there was a lot of baggage. And so I could kind of see through a lot of that. But for me, I was like,
there were a lot of
I knew,
underlying issues.
I knew
but
you were hurting. Well,
yeah.
everybody has issues that
Yeah,
they bring in.
it's not an excuse.
But I feel like the first
whatsoever.
5 years is like, dealing with those, my parents did this, your parents did this, and this movie had this relationship, and I really liked this, and that's
that's
not a
handle
strategy.
conflict? How do we no?
I mean, you're ironing all those things out.
Yeah.
I mean, just so many problems and challenges that you're dealing with in the first 5 years. But the hard conversation is where we both felt like this is where you have to start.
Yeah.
Even if the start was 5 years, right? I mean, 5 years of hard conversations, but it was one defining moment that was like, wait a minute, okay, things were definitely changing in our lives, and
that is the hard conversation that I felt like I remember the most of. Like, in my opinion, that was the one that I feel like the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, of like, okay, like I need to get
but the truth is, though, it wasn't like our entire relationship was like just crumbling and cracking and we hated each other, and there were just issues that we couldn't get on the same page about. But it wasn't like we didn't have fun. It wasn't like we didn't go on vacation. It wasn't like we
weren't hanging out, doing date nights, watching movies, because at the core you are my very best friend, and we have fun together, but it was fundamental, like, things that were easy to you were not easy to me. And
I think expectations.
Yeah.
I think,
ours was very much expectations.
And I think the other thing, which of course we'll get into later on, but it's just learning how to meet each other's needs and what each other needs to make this relationship work. Because you can have fun, you can go on vacations, you can do things, you can keep up appearances, which a lot of people do. But I think one of the things that we didn't realize was how to get to the root of what each other needs out of this relationship in order to thrive.
Yeah. To me, it was, I don't know, I am not a perfectionist in any way, shape, or form, like in my day-to-day life, if you know me at all. But in my mind, if I was having like to work on something, then I was failing at everything. And I was, not that like weight plays a part, but it did for me. I was the heaviest I had ever been. And I was in a kind of toxic work environment. I was like surrounded just by negativity, and I do not thrive around negativity. And so there were so many things that I felt like I was failing everywhere. Like, I came home and felt like I was failing you. I went to work and felt like I was failing. Like, it was just all areas. Yeah. That it was just, okay, am I failing? I felt like I was. So then my mind goes to like, well, if you're failing everywhere, then why try? But that's where you were bold enough to bring up,
Well, and to me, I mean, working on things was just kind of normal, I mean, we go to work, I mean, we move the needle, right? And so for me, it was, working on things didn't necessarily mean we were a failure at life. It was just more of, there's tweaks, there's different things you do daily, weekly, monthly, that, add up over time. There's just, work has to be done. So for me, I don't know, maybe it was a little bit easier for me to kind of see, like, not marriage as a business, because I feel like there were a ton of times that I related our relationship to running a business.
Very many times.
Let's sit down at the table and go over, the cleaning chart or the meal plan, or, let's take an inventory of the, refrigerator and the pantry. And there were things that were just simple to me, but that weren't simple to you. And I just couldn't understand, why in the world do you not know these things?
Yeah.
How do you not know these things?
And then that obviously again made me feel like a failure, because if you know and you're a man, like, I should know because I'm a woman.
Yeah, but working on things really just meant that there were things that we needed to understand about each other. There were things that we wanted to grow in, or areas that we weren't necessarily the most proficient in. And that's, I mean, maybe that's a good point, because I'm just thinking about this now of maybe, like you, most think that you get married and you should know these things.
Where I just did not.
Yeah, I did. Honestly, I mean, even to this moment, I guess I forget that sometimes of, I don't know if it's being a one or just on the Enneagram or just kind of being me, but I forget sometimes that a lot of people are fearful to grow, to ask questions, to quote unquote work on things because they think that, well, I'm, 5 years into my marriage, I should know these
and
things.
so if I ask, I'm going to look like an idiot.
Yeah. And
that was my thought process.
Well, and to me, it was just, I didn't know everything, and one of my, philosophies in life, I'm sure you will understand is, if you don't know, then just research, right?
Yeah.
Put some research in
Nate
time.
is a researcher by trade, honestly.
Just put some time in, just Google, do a Google search, right? And
get a little googly.
But not everybody's like that.
Yeah.
And not everybody knows that, by asking a question, by having a hard conversation, that you might actually learn something. You might actually grow, but that uncomfortable, like the initial mountain you have to climb to get over the uncomfortableness that you feel, there's greener pastures on the other side.
And you kind of have to have a shift in your mindset of okay, I'm going to lay down my pride, which was hard for me because, again, I felt like I should know. I felt like I should know all of these things, and I didn't. So then I was finally like, okay, if he knows something I don't, that's not a negative thing. Why don't I use that to my advantage? And that is still hard because I am more prideful, don't want to ask for help, don't want to be a burden and all of these things. But a shift in your mindset has to happen of you know what, if they're willing to bring up this conversation, then, I need to be willing to listen and put in the work.
So I'll give you a on the spot question here. So year 3, I'm sure we had some terrible conversations that weren't, maybe I didn't say the exact words that I said, but for maybe somebody listening or watching, they're like, I'm bringing up these hard conversations. I want my marriage to work, but I just don't see that shift in mindset from the other person. What would you say? Where were you year 2 or 3 where you hadn't shifted, you weren't listening, you were still in your place of I should know these things, I don't know these things. And every time he brings this up, it just makes me feel worse and worse and worse. What do you do?
In that sense, I feel like that is when you start working on yourself, in my mind. But I feel like that's when you just kept showing up for me, which was what I needed, even if I didn't know it. I just needed you to show up for me and know that you might not be getting a whole lot in return, but knowing
so
you
just
made
keep
vows.
doing the same thing over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, isn't it?
Well, it worked, didn't it?
Well, yeah, sure felt like insanity.
It worked after a while.
Yeah.
But that is where, I don't know everyone's beliefs, ask the Lord for wisdom. Where he apparently gave you the words to say, yeah, they hurt and, hurt bad, but it was what I needed at the right time to where it was finally okay, I feel a breakthrough coming of we are, willing to have this conversation, and I was more willing to listen. So, something that now I feel like that we are more versed in having a conversation. If there's something I want to bring up to you, I will say, Lord, give me the words to hear and him the ears to listen. And that's,
So a whole lot of prayer and just, keep having the hard conversations.
Yeah, keep at it, because you might not think.
And we're not talking about every day, every hour of every minute, beat up on your partner, but just
And there's a difference in having a hard conversation and getting verbally abused.
Yeah, that's true.
There is
that is very
huge
true.
difference.
Yep.
And that was never.
And you should never do that. I'm sure there were probably some lines crossed along the way where I was just frustrated and said
trying
some
to shake
things.
me just get out of your own head.
Which is definitely not it, because you will definitely win a lot, maybe quicker with love. And I think that was something I didn't know that. And until years of counseling, that the environment, and there were just other things that were at play there that I just didn't understand. I couldn't wrap my brain. I didn't walk your walk. I didn't live what you had lived at that point, and so I was just trying to communicate to you how I thought I should communicate. And it was what motivates me as a one. Well, I get frustrated and mad, and then I want to act. So perfect. So then maybe I need to get her frustrated and mad. And that was the complete opposite of the right, Definitely not appropriate.
But for you, how did you know to bring up that kind of hard conversation?
Well, that's a good question. I just loved you so much. I really did. And I think, I said this earlier, but I just knew there was something better. I just knew, we had a rocky, dating start. I mean, I just was not in the place to love. I had been through a lot of terrible relationships. And then, there were quite a few other factors that tried to, come between us and our dating and even right up until marriage. And then there were just roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, as I'm sure many can relate, I just knew, okay, we've been through too much.
We did not come this far to just come this far. Yeah.
I just knew it. And I also knew that, deep down inside, I just knew you were an incredible person. And I knew that, when we did start dating early on, you brought things out in me. As I'm sure, every dating relationship, there has to be something good. The spark's got to fly. The makeout's great. Whatever it is, there's got to be something that, gets the gears turning towards a commitment and a committed relationship.
I want this forever. Yeah.
And I kept going back to that. Man, we just have so much fun. We still had fun. You were still this person, but I just knew, okay, so we're capable of so much more. And I think that's what kind of kept me going. And then I think the second piece of that too was there was just sometimes I was just frustrated.
Yeah.
There were sometimes I was just in sheer frustration of I feel wronged because, you're not doing exactly what I want you to do in the manner of which you should do it.
Cinnamon rolls.
Well, yes, don't burn the cinnamon rolls, please.
Fun fact, if you ever make cinnamon rolls, do not burn them. Just don't.
Well, I wasn't going to say I'm a connoisseur, but I've had a good many cinnamon rolls in my day, and
true.
They got to be the right texture, fluff, and just the right amount of cinnamon and icing.
And flakiness. I get it. Buttery, flaky crust.
Buttery, flaky crust.
I get it.
But that was just, I just knew there was something more. I just knew it, and deep down in my bones. And so, but I can't, not talk about this. There were some times I just truly did want to hurt you. There were truly times I just wanted to hurt you. And I feel I don't know if this is the first time you're probably hearing me say that, but
it is.
there were just times I was just trying to be hurtful, and I was trying to get you to move because I just did not understand. And I didn't really want to take the time to understand because I just felt you should just do what I want you to do. You should just already know these things. You should just be this way and not know, it's not just as easy as, a snap. It's not just easy as the flick of the wrist, or, you can't just throw money at the problem. You have to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I didn't know, was just kind of I want to talk about it once, because that's the most efficient way, right? You talk about it once, you make a plan, and then you never make that same mistake again. But what I didn't realize was a lot of myself was coming out in those conversations too of, I could relate in many ways to there were things that I didn't know. There were many things I didn't know. And I felt the same anger that you did, because as I'm sitting here pointing the finger to you saying, hey, well, you don't know how to do this. There was a million other things in the back of my mind in that same moment that I was like, well, Nate, you son of a dadgum hypocrite. Because what about this that you don't know about? And what about this that you don't know about? And you don't know, these things. You pretend like you do. And that, I'm a good BSer sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
to BS my way into a situation. But yeah, I think that was, it was just hard. And it was just, but I just knew I needed to get back at you. But I also knew that there was so much more capable of this, but I just didn't know how to start. And I feel like we really just kind of stumbled into hard conversations is step number one. If there's a problem in your relationship, if there's a problem in your life, if you're not where you want to be, the first step is to have a hard conversation with yourself. And
someone has to be bold enough.
Yep. And if you're single, you got to be bold to yourself. If you're in a relationship, then one of you's got to step up. And if you're in a marriage.
Because you can even have that's a good point. You can even have hard conversations to yourself. And that's where my hard conversation, which was between me and sweet Jesus and
I didn't even think about this, but the one on the Enneagram, which is what I am, the inner critic is so loud and so nasty that I feel like life is a continuously hard conversation for me. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, 22, 23 years of this loud inner critic of these hard conversations. And every step of my life, it was just like, well, life is a hard conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about that until we're literally chatting now. I'm like, man, it just came easier to me. Because it was like, well, I beat myself up every day, so I might as well beat you up too, right?
And I was just living in a trauma response, like just living in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you don't know how to thrive because you are just focused on making it to the next day. And, you know, if I knew then what I know now, you know, I am curious to how much further along we would be. But, you know, here we are now.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true.
And I will say your first, second, third, probably fourth and fifth hard conversation will be messy. There will be tears. I had many a tears because when I get overwhelmed, sometimes I just cry. I used to never cry. Now all of a sudden I like
some deep, dark cries.
Like, I mean, ugly tears.
But pause there for a second. So I bring something up. It's super hard. I mean, is the tears? I have to wonder, were the tears, you know, just like, woe is me, I'm a deadbeat, I feel like I'm the worst person in the world? Or was there the slight bit of freedom knowing that, like, okay, he brought this thing up and now it's to light, and now
mixture,
like, okay.
yeah, of like fear of like, is he gonna leave? You know, that was always a fear of mine. I'm just being straight up honest. That was a fear of thing of like, oh, he doesn't see me as perfect anymore. Not that you ever did, but in my mind, it was like...
There was a time when you thought I thought you were perfect?
In my brain, I was like, well, if I mess up, I still have an issue with like, I don't think I can make mistakes, which we literally had that conversation yesterday.
I mean, you are perfect. Let's be honest, babe.
I know. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but...
You were fishing for the compliment. I see exactly what you were doing.
But you know, it was fear of you saw something you did not like. And again, people pleaser by nature, I had to let you down. And so it was this pressure that I had put on myself of like, I, by my own doing, let him down in the biggest way I possibly could have. And that was just not showing up well.
So, I mean, for the folks at home, I feel like I'm hearing you saying like, I'm not perfect. I don't do all the things right. I make mistakes. I don't feel like I'm a perfect person for him. And so I don't feel like I'm worthy of being loved.
Yes, very much so.
And I feel like that is such a relatable place with anyone, because we're all, I mean, we want relationship, right? We want love. And so I feel like it's, you know, we're in this marriage where we're supposed to love each other. We're in this relationship where we're supposed to like be together. But here you are feeling that even just the slightest mistake, it's like, oh my gosh,
he's not going
to
love me.
He doesn't love me. Which... Oof.
Yeah.
That's a hard place. It really is.
Yeah. But I will say, like, when I saw the biggest shift in the hard conversations to where they started clicking was when I started doing work on myself. And that was, you know, we both started waking up very early together, but it's easier if you do it together. I am just going to say, like, if one of you is trying to get up and the other one is still in bed, you are, that is a recipe for disaster. But
get up.
Yeah. We got timed lights that turned on at a certain time. So our room was really bright and it was great. But
my solution was always to sleep with the, you know, the blinds open, but you didn't like that.
No, because that is, I don't know. For me, that's just harder. But I, you know, started reading, not reading self-help books, but kind of like reading self-help books, reading scripture of like, okay, you know, Lord, show me how to move myself. And that was kind of the direction he pushed me in. And there was a podcast, the Mel Robbins podcast. She was talking about how when people get divorced, they do all of this work on themselves after. They cut their hair, they get in the best shape of their life. You know, they read all these books, do all these things. And her mindset was like, why not do that while you're married and see the benefit rather than waiting until it's too late?
You know, it's crazy. We're talking. I'm remembering so much. I feel like my memory is terrible sometimes, but.
And I have like the memory of an elephant.
Well, I remember. I think it was after that night I left. went to the mountain. I mean, just prayed, and I was like, Lord, I just don't even want to come down from the mountain because I don't know what to do, and I'm going to have to face these problems again. And I know, there's a 50-50 shot on like this might work, and we might have more conversations. And I was just like, I'm just so tired of this. But I remember, I think it was right after that night, I remember you saying like, I need your help.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get out of this funk. I don't know what to do. And I think that's when I think we both were talking, and I was just kind of like, you do nothing for yourself.
Yeah.
You do nothing to build up your confidence. You do nothing to like build up this trust in yourself. Like you don't keep the promises to yourself. Like,
which now as a 9, I know it's like I focus on everyone else.
well, and I had heard
myself,
like,
so I get it.
Ed Milet say one time, like, like the more you keep your promises to yourself of getting up early or working out or reading, like the more you say, Nate, I'm going to do this, Tiffany, I'm going to do this, and you actually do it, is the more you start to trust yourself and you build this confidence that like, okay, I mess up, not a big deal, So I think that's when that, I guess part of the mindset shift was like, okay, you got to go to work on yourself. Okay, like
start keeping little
we can't
promises to
change
yourself,
until
and
you
can
change.
keep promises to other
Yep.
people.
We can't change our relationship until we start to change, right? I mean, there's definitely some change that happens like together, hand in hand on our relationship, but like change has to happen on like an introspective level of the hard conversation that we had together then turned to, okay, Nate, I'm staring at you in the mirror. You got to change too. You can't just sit here and point fingers at her or sit down at the table or tell her to do all these things, and you have to start changing too. And so I think that's when we started then having hard conversations with ourselves of like, okay, I'm not where I want to be. I don't, have the money that I want to have, or I don't have the success or whatever. I'm not who I want to be in this relationship. So like ding, 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 ding. No wonder your relationship is not where you want it to be, because you're not where you want it to be. Like you are not even on the path that you want to be on, which means, how in the world is your relationship going to be on the same path?
So that's where like you start looking for small wins, essentially, of like a small win was me getting up at 5:30 in the morning. Like that was a small win. Small win was making it to the garage to work out. Like, there were small things along the way, but then that proved.
But you did, at the time, you didn't think that those small wins really amounted to anything.
But they did.
I remember you saying that. Well, this is, washing the dishes or, doing a little laundry. Those aren't, really wins. Like I need to lose, 50 pounds. I need to, have all these things, all these big things, but it was like, no. That's not even remotely it. And we started to see the, conversations change for sure. So we wrote down just a couple of tactics, right? I mean, just of hard conversations. I'm a tactical person. I really need strategy of like, okay, we're going to break through some of the emotions, but at the same time, I want to have some things that I can do, right? We just jot. So of course, first is to identify there's a problem. Whoever identifies the problem first might need to be the one to step up first, right?
Yeah.
Identifies the problem. We're not where we want to be. I'm not where I want to be. Our relationship is failing. We don't ever talk. You're not meeting my needs. I'm not meeting your needs. Whatever that problem is, it's like, okay. And there may be a million problems. There may be like you fill a book full of stuff that's like, man, but
some of those may self-resolve if you work on yourself first.
Yeah.
And that would probably be my first tactic.
So, of course, the first conversation is messy. It's going to be messy. The second conversation is going to be messy. They're all going to be messy because, I mean, it's just such an emotional, just hard,
you
nasty,
have so much invested.
It's just the worst, I think, probably part of relationship is the hard conversations, because that is the first step in change and in growth, but at the same time, the first step down the right path.
But to me, and this is a key that we have carried into everything, go into the conversation, go into everyday life, remembering that you are on the same team. Like we are #Team Byram all day, day. And that's easy to like keep as your home base of like, okay, we might fight like cats and dogs during this hard conversation, but like we're on the same team and we're both fighting to make this better.
But I feel like there's a but here. I'm always the but. I am a but sometimes. I'm sorry. But I'm throwing stones at you. I'm like telling you all the bad things that you're doing wrong, and yet you truly believe that we're on the same team?
deep down, but like in the moment, no. But again, you would not be fighting if you did not care. Truly, it's hard to see that, and it was hard for me to see that. But
so for the roles, then you're saying the person that steps up that says, "Hey, I'm having the hard conversation with you. You're not doing these things." I mean, how do you know we're on the same team? I mean, I guess
I would not bring this up if I did not care.
So you just have to know if that person brings up something hard with you, then that's a good sign. That's a really good sign.
You verbatim said, the day I stop bringing up hard things is when you need to work.
Which I believed. I was like, listen, I mean, if I didn't want to work on this and I just
was
wanted to leave.
Okay, wait, he really, like, that showed me you're working on this.
So you probably need to add that verbiage in there of like, I'm bringing this up because we're on the same team. I want to be on the same team.
We are on the same team.
And this is a good sign.
I will fight until my dying breath for you.
I mean, if Tiffany can essentially come back from the verbal assault at the kitchen table from her husband, then like Nate and her can have a better relationship. That means I can have a better relationship.
That was not the first conversation we had.
Well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't.
Time.
It wasn't. But we're on the same team.
Yeah.
The B
and that's
fan.
like, for me, we're the B team, y'all. But that's for
B
me.
Team. Always bringing our A game, right?
Yeah, the B team always bringing our A game. But for me now, being removed, that is what I would have told myself sitting at that table.
Okay.
So if you're in the midst of these hard conversations, remember you're on the same team.
But conversation number one, I wasn't like, okay, let me go and read through my notes here. It wasn't, we're on the same team, babe.
Yeah,
I love you.
It was
Everything
throwing
is
stones.
great.
It was throwing stones for sure.
So just the messy, but hopefully
if
you
I
can
could
learn
go
a
back
lesson.
to that sweet little newlywed girl who had no idea what she was doing, I would be like, hey, you're on the same team.
And to remember that, just because you're working on something in your relationship or your marriage, that doesn't mean you're a failure.
Yeah, you are not failing. You're not failing just because
you're working on something. You're not where you're supposed to be. You make a mistake.
And that is still an inner talk I have to have with myself.
Listen, I'll raise my hand too.
Yeah.
When I am terrible. When I make a mistake, oof.
Yeah.
I think the world is ending. I feel like everything is crumbling on top of me and I don't know what to do. And I mean, failure is not a mistake. It is saying, all right.
Just make sure you're failing in the right direction.
I'm done.
Like, I'm failing, but I'm trying, and I'm failing in the correct direction. Because you could also fail by not doing anything, which is what I was doing. But if you're trying, odds are you will still fail along the way, but you're failing in the correct direction, which
failing
is a thing.
Forward, yeah,
failing
which is
forward,
definitely a thing.
yeah, definitely,
which is definitely a thing of fail forward, move forward, work on yourself, work on your marriage, but it starts with that hard conversation, and then after that hard conversation is more hard conversations, and then more hard conversations, and then of course, please add in the verbiage. We are on the same team here, and because I'm bringing this up, that means I want this to work. So you need to hear me when I say that, and that might take a couple of times too.
Yes.
It may take 365 tries of like, hey, we're on the same team. Good morning.
Like,
we're on the same team.
Yeah,
Good
like
evening.
Fist bump. Hey, we're on the same team,
Yep.
but
Yep.
I need you to show up better.
And then, of course, you can also initiate sequence. No, what is it? Initiating Operation Thirsty Thursdays.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to here in just a bit.
Yeah.
No matter what life throws at you,
Good or bad,
always remember
to just go with it.
Peace!
See you next.